The rain is falling in sheets. Neriah doesn't have an umbrella. She never has one when she needs one. Her apron is soaked through, plastered against her thighs, and the twins are pressed so tightly into her sides she can feel their heartbeats through their thin cotton dresses. 2 small fists grip the back of her uniform. 4 small knuckles white as bone. The motorcycles come from both ends of the street at once. No sirens. No shouting. That's the part that should scare her most, the silence. 6 bikes, 7 riders, engines cut low, headlamps flooding the wet asphalt and blinding white columns. They form a slow arc around the 3 of them, taking their time. Because they don't need to rush. Because in this world, in this part of the city, at this hour, there is no one coming to help a waitress and 2 little girls standing in the middle of a rain-soaked street. Neriah keeps her arms out. She doesn't know why. It's not a choice she made consciously. Her body just did it, spread wide, the way a mother bird spreads her wings, the way something instinctual and ancient overrides reason. The girls press tighter against her. One of them is shaking. The other has stopped making sound entirely, which is somehow worse. The rider at the front removes his helmet. He is unhurried. He sets it on the handlebar like a man who has done this 1,000 times. His face is flat, weathered, unreadable. He looks at Neriah the way a person looks at an obstacle in a road, not with anger, not with cruelty, just with the mild inconvenience of something unexpected in the path. "Step aside," he says. Not loud. He doesn't need to be loud. The rain fills the silence between them. Neriah doesn't move. This is the part she will think about later, lying awake, her ceiling fan turning lazy circles in the heat of her 1-bedroom apartment. The part where she should have calculated. Should have weighed options. Should have found the rational exit. She will think, "What was wrong with you?" She will have no good answer. Only the memory of 2 sets of fingers gripping the back of her uniform, and the fact that her feet simply refused the instruction. "Step aside," the man says again. Still flat. Still patient. "No," Neriah says. Not defiantly. Not with trembling bravado. She says it the way she tells the cook when an order is wrong, as a matter of plain fact, delivered without ornament, because there is nothing else to say. The rider's jaw tightens. Just slightly. "You don't belong here," he says. She looks at him in the white flood of the headlamps, rain running down her face, soaking her locks, pooling in the hollow of her collarbone. The twins haven't let go. She can feel the small one's forehead against the small of her back. "I know," she says. And here is the thing that will haunt her for weeks, the thing she cannot explain to herself or to anyone else. She is calm. Not frozen. Not numb. Not performing. Calm the way deep water is calm. Still at the surface. Moving in ways you can't see underneath. The man stares at her. He is used to people moving. He is used to the calculation on their faces, fear, then capitulation, then the small shuffle sideways that says "I was never here, I saw nothing, this has nothing to do with me." He is not used to this. He is not used to a woman in a soaked waitress uniform standing in a rain-filled street with her arms out, looking at him the way she might look at a customer who ordered the wrong thing. His eyes cut to the girls. Then back to her. Something crosses his face that she can't name. He doesn't move. You're probably wondering why a waitress would risk her life for 2 children she didn't know. Why her feet didn't move when the rational thing, the surviving thing, was to simply step aside. The truth is, she already knew something was wrong before this night even started. The Meridian Diner sits on the corner of Voss and 14th, between a check-cashing place with bars on the windows and a laundromat that's been closed for 2 years. It is not the kind of place people choose. It is the kind of place people end up. Neriah has worked there for 3 years. Long enough to know the regulars. Long enough to know, down to the quarter, which tables tip and which ones don't. Long enough to learn how to read a room the way some people read weather, not from instruments, but from pressure shifts in the air, from the quality of silence, from the way certain types of men sit. She noticed the cars first. Dark sedans. Different plates, but the same make. The same tinted windows. They rotated, Tuesday a silver one, Thursday black, Sunday two at once, but they always parked in the same spot across the street, just outside the ring of the streetlight. The drivers never came in. They never moved, except once per hour, circling the block then returning. She clocked it after the 4th week. The men inside, not the drivers, different men, came in at the same time each visit. They sat in booths, not at the counter. They ordered coffee. They didn't drink it. They paid in cash, always exact, never leaving a receipt on the table. They looked at their phones but they weren't scrolling. They were watching something. Or waiting for something. Neriah took their orders and kept her face entirely neutral. She had learned that particular skill early. In the foster system, in the group homes, in every room where the wrong expression on your face could make your situation worse, she had mastered the art of seeing without appearing to see. Of knowing without broadcasting that she knew. What she was learning about these men was that they were not here for the food. She had begun mentally cataloging. The man in the far booth who always sat facing the door. The woman, rare, just once, who came in dress down, baseball cap, zero jewelry, who sat for 45 minutes and left without touching her pie. The cash. Always cash. Even for a 70-cent coffee refill. They're not waiting for food, she thought. They're waiting for something else. Then the twins came in. A Wednesday. 9:47 p.m. Neriah remembers the time because the kitchen had just called last orders, and she'd been untying her apron. The door opened. 2 girls. 6 years old, maybe 7. Identical. Same dark hair, same gray dresses, same scuffed white shoes. They walked in holding hands, and they didn't look at anyone. They took the corner booth, the one furthest from the windows, and they sat. Facing inward. Their backs to the room. No parents. Neriah approached them. Hi, babies. What can I get you? The one on the left looked up at her. Her eyes were enormous. Still. The kind of still that isn't calm, it's the stillness of an animal that has learned that movement draws attention. Nothing, she said. Her voice was small and careful. The other one didn't look up at all. Neriah glanced toward the window. The silver sedan was there. She looked back at the girls. At their hands folded on the table. At the slight flinch when the kitchen door banged open. At the way the one who hadn't spoken leaned almost imperceptibly toward the wall, as though reducing her outline. She'd seen that before. She'd been that before. They're not hungry, she thought. They're hiding. She almost walked away. Almost folded her apron and told herself it was none of her business, which it wasn't. Which it absolutely, definitively, objectively was not. But one small detail stopped her. The sedan across the street had not moved. In 3 weeks of watching, it had always moved, once an hour, on the circuit. It had been 48 minutes. It was not moving. It was pointed directly at the diner window. She almost ignored it. She almost let reason win. But instead, she walked back to their table. And she said something that pulled her into a world she didn't understand. You can stay as long as you need to. That was it. That was what she said. 6 words. She said them quietly, the way you pass something fragile, and she kept her voice level and she kept her face the same as always. Then she refilled the water glasses, which neither girl had touched, and she went back to the counter and she pretended to wipe it down. The one who hadn't spoken looked up for the first time. Neriah didn't turn around. She felt it the way you feel when someone photographs you from behind, a shift in the air, a weight on the back of your neck. She kept wiping. She counted to 10. She set down the cloth. She'd recognized it the second they walked in, not with her mind, which would have listed reasons to stay out of it, but with something older than reason. Something located in the chest. She had sat in corner booths herself, as a child. Had counted the minutes until a safe adult appeared, or didn't. Had memorized which faces in a room were dangerous, and which were just indifferent. She knew what frightened children looked like when they were trying very hard not to look frightened. These girls were terrified. Not of her. That she was sure of. They were terrified of the outside, the window, the door, the sound of every vehicle that slowed on the street. She grabbed her bag from under the counter. This was the moment, she could feel it with a clarity that surprised her. The moment where you choose the clean exit. Clocked out. Done. The cook was already shutting things down. Leon at the register was counting the drawer. She had a 30-minute bus ride and a load of laundry and an early shift tomorrow and exactly none of the tools or training or authority to manage whatever was happening in that corner booth. Her hand found the bag strap. She stood there for 3 seconds. Then she put the bag back down and walked to their table. She sat across from them. "My name is Neriah," she said. "I've been here a long time. Nobody's going to make you leave." The girl who spoke, the one on the left, searched her face. Children do that, Neriah had noticed. They hadn't learned yet to look at mouths and eyes the way adults do, performing the social theater of attention. They look at the whole face. They're reading something deeper, checking for the misalignment between what someone says and what the face is doing underneath. Whatever she found, she decided on. "I'm Aya," she said. She pointed to her sister. "That's Zara." Zara was looking at the table. "Hi, Aya." "Hi, Zara." Neriah kept her voice exactly the same, no elevation, no performance of warmth, just plain and steady. "Is there someone I can call for you?" Aya's jaw tightened. A child's jaw. Impossibly small. "No." "Okay." Neriah nodded. "Then you can sit here." She didn't ask more. She didn't press. She got up, went to the kitchen, and came back with 2 plates of fries and 2 cups of chocolate milk, which she set down without ceremony, and she returned to the counter and resumed her closing tasks. I ate. Zara didn't. But she reached out and put 1 fry in her mouth, slowly, the way someone eats when they've forgotten they're allowed to. Neriah watched the window. The sedan had moved. New position, closer to the corner now, angle adjusted. She could see the faint glow of a phone screen through the windshield. At 10:23 p.m., she untied her apron, came back to the booth, and said, "I'm getting off now. I'll walk with you until you're somewhere safe." I looked at her again. The whole face look. "You don't know what you're walking into," she said. And Neriah thought, "You're probably right." She thought, "I am almost certainly making a mistake." She thought of the sedan and the cash payments and the men who watched and never ate. She picked up the girls' jackets from the booth and held them out. "Let's go," she said. She didn't know their last name was Vasca. She didn't know that name had been spoken in lowered voices across 4 countries for 30 years. That in certain rooms, in certain cities, the name was enough to stop a conversation completely, not because people feared saying it wrong, but because saying it at all was a commitment. You were either in or out the moment it left your mouth. She didn't know that the man who bore that name, their father, had not been told his daughters were gone. That the message his security team had sent him, 3 hours ago, had contained the words contained and transferred in the way those words are used when something has been moved without consent. That somewhere across the city, in a building with windows that did not open, a man named Dario Vasca was reading that message for the 5th time, and his stillness was the kind that precedes catastrophe. She didn't know any of this. What she knew was that Aya's hand had found hers before they reached the door. Small fingers. Cold. She knew the weight of Zara pressing into her left side. She knew the sedan had started its engine. She pushed through the diner door into the rain. The girls were not lost. This was the truth she couldn't have known and would understand only later. They had not wandered or strayed or been separated from a distracted parent in a crowd. They had been placed, moved from one location to another as a message, as leverage, as a demonstration of capability. Someone inside Dario Vasca's organization, someone trusted, someone with access to schedules and routes and the specific details that only proximity produces, had leaked where the girls would be that night. The diner had been chosen because it was public enough to seem safe. The sedan across the street was not protection. Neriah didn't know that either. What she had misread as surveillance, the car, the rotating drivers, the cash-paying watchers, was not the organization's security watching over their girls. It was the faction that had moved them, confirming delivery. Confirming the girls were where they were supposed to be, for whoever had arranged to collect them. And Neriah had walked in between. She would think later about how close it was. How if she had untied her apron 20 minutes earlier, or if the twins had sat at the counter instead of the corner booth, or if Leon had noticed and called someone before she did, the entire architecture of what followed would have been different. She would think, a 23-year-old waitress from the Meridian Diner on Voss and 14th should not be the thing that derailed a professional operation. But she was. And the man who had spent 3 hours reading a 2-word message in a building across the city, contained and transferred, had just received a second message. This one said, disruption at the handoff point. 2 men waiting. Origin unclear, He read it once. He stood. Dario Vasca was not a man who moved unnecessarily. People who had worked with him for a decade had never seen him raise his voice. He communicated in the fewest possible words, and when he stopped communicating entirely, that was the signal everyone around him had learned to fear most. He stopped communicating. He put his phone face down on the table. Then he looked at the man standing at the door to the room and said one word, in a voice so quiet the man had to lean in to hear it. Go. Neriah didn't know any of this. She was walking out of a diner in the rain, holding the hand of a 6-year-old named Aya, with the sedan's headlights tracking her movement, and the street ahead empty and glistening under the orange wash of the street lamps. And somewhere in the city a man she had never met already knew his daughters were in the hands of a stranger. And what he didn't know yet, what would change everything when he found out, was that the stranger had not run. The motorcycles hold their formation. Neriah doesn't count them, there is no version of that number that helps her, so she stops looking at it. She looks at the man without the helmet. She looks at his hands, which are at his sides. She looks at the distance between him and the girls, which she is still covering. The rain comes down. Nobody speaks. This is the second thing that should frighten her, and doesn't, the waiting. Men like this, organized men, operational men, don't wait unless they're waiting for something specific. They're waiting for her to calculate. They're waiting for the math to complete itself in her face. 6 bikes, 1 woman, 2 children, empty street. They're waiting for the step sideways. She doesn't step sideways. These children are not going with you, she says. She says it without heat, without volume, and that, she will understand later, is the thing that unsettles the man with the flat face. He expected fear or fire. Both are manageable. Both are anticipated. A waitress with her arms spread wide, speaking in the same flat register that she uses to tell a customer the kitchen's out of waffles. That's something else. He looks at her for a long time. The rider to his left says something low and quick in a language she doesn't understand. The man with the flat face doesn't respond. He's still looking at her. Zara has her face buried in Neriah's side. Aya is gripping the back of the apron with both hands. Neriah can feel the intermittent trembling, the child breathing in deliberate counts, the way adults do in waiting rooms before bad news. Too controlled for 6 years old. Too practiced. She's done this before, Neriah thinks. She's been afraid like this before. The man with the flat face looks down at the girls. Then he looks back at Neriah. Something shifts in the configuration of his face, not emotion, exactly, more like recalibration. Like a man adjusting his read of a situation. He signals. The motorcycle's engines cough back to life. One by one, the bikes reverse their positions, opening the arc, creating a gap in the formation at the far end of the street. The man replaces his helmet, unhurried, deliberate, the same way he removed it. He looks at Neriah one final time through the visor. She does not look away. He rides. They all ride. The sound fills the street, and then empties from it, the engine noise trailing down the block and around a corner and gone, and the rain fills the silence left behind, and Neriah realizes her arms are shaking. Not from fear, from effort. From the minutes of holding them out, from the full-body work of standing still when every nerve was screaming trajectory. Aya exhales against her side. Zara's grip on the apron loosens, finger by finger, like a slow unclenching. Neriah breathes. It looked like she had won. That's the thing about a world operating at that level. It doesn't look the way it actually is. What looked like a standoff was a test. What looked like her courage forcing a retreat was, in fact, those men receiving a message she couldn't hear. Stand down, new information, wait for confirmation. They had not been turned away by a waitress with her arms out in the rain. They had been paused. There is a difference. She took the girls around the corner. Found a 24-hour pharmacy on the next block, warm and lit and staffed. She bought them hot cocoa from the machine by the door and sat them in the plastic chairs near the pharmacist's window, and she sat between them, and she did not take out her phone, and she did not think about what had just happened on that street. She focused on the small weight of Aya's head, which had come to rest against her arm. On the warmth of the cup between her hands. On the sound of the rain against the pharmacy window. She thought, it's over. In that world, nothing ends when it looks like it does. She had been seen. Not by anyone she knew. Not by anyone on that street, or in that diner, or in the pharmacy where she sat with 2 children and a cup of hot cocoa, believing the worst was behind her. She had been seen by a system, and systems do not forget, do not lose interest, do not go home at the end of a shift. The cameras were on every corner of that neighborhood. The Meridian Diner had one facing the street, old, cheap, but functional. The pharmacy had 3. There was a traffic camera at Voss and 14th that had footage of her walking out of the diner, and a business security camera across from the pharmacy that had her entering it. By midnight, someone had run her face. Not the police. Not any government database. A different kind of infrastructure, quieter, more specific, older. The kind built over decades in places where official records aren't reliable, where what you need to know about a person isn't in any file but can be assembled from fragments. A uniform, a neighborhood, a building. Who pays rent to whom? By 12:17 a.m., they had her name. Neriah Osei. 23 years old. Employed at the Meridian Diner, Voss and 14th, for 3 years. Prior to that, waitress at a diner in the Garfield district. Prior to that, 2 years at a fast food location that had since closed. Rented a 1-bedroom apartment on Calder Street, Unit 4B, 3rd floor walk-up, rent paid by direct deposit from the diner's weekly payroll. No car registered in her name. 1 credit card, mostly unused. No arrests. No affiliations. What interested them was the last item on that list. No affiliations. She hadn't shown up in their database before this night. She had no known connection to the Vasca organization, to the faction that had moved the girls, or to any of the parties involved. She was, in the clearest possible sense of the word, a civilian. A woman who worked for tips and took the bus and lived on the 3rd floor of a building on Calder Street. And she had stepped into the middle of a professional operation and stood there. That was the thing they kept returning to. She wasn't in danger because of what she had done, though she had done enough to make her relevant. She was in danger because she was now visible. She existed in the record. Her name was attached to a timestamp, attached to an address, attached to a night that certain people would spend a considerable amount of energy ensuring no civilian could accurately describe. She didn't know this. She was still in the pharmacy at 12:17 a.m., with Aya asleep against her arm, when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Blocked number. Text message. 3 words. Don't go home. She stared at it for a long time. Aya stirred. Neriah? I'm here. She kept her voice level. The whole face thing, she understood it now from both sides. Go back to sleep. She didn't go back to sleep herself. She sat in the plastic pharmacy chair and she watched the door and the window and she thought about the sedan and the motorcycles and the cash-paying watchers and the way the man with the flat face had looked at her girls. Her girls, she thought, and caught herself on it, and she thought about who could have her number, who could be watching this pharmacy on a Wednesday night after midnight. She thought, I should call someone. She thought, who would I call? The pharmacist was reading something behind the counter. The fluorescent lights hummed. The rain had eased but not stopped. The door to the pharmacy opened. She was on her feet before she knew she was moving, body between the door and the girls, and then she stopped. It was not the man with the flat face. It was a woman, young, short hair, jacket zipped to the chin, who looked at Neriah standing guard over two sleeping children with an expression that wasn't surprise. "He sent me," she said quietly. "You're all coming with me." Neriah's hands were still shaking. She had not been removed from the game. She had not slipped through the cracks, as she had almost let herself believe. She had simply changed how the game would use her. She meets Dario Vasca at 11 o'clock the following morning. Not in the diner. Not in any place she would have imagined. A restaurant she had passed 100 times on the number 12 bus without ever considering she might enter. Dark wood, white tablecloths, the kind of place where the lunch crowd is sparse because the check would swallow her week. The woman with the short hair, who had given her name only as Wren, offered nothing else, brings her through a side entrance and to a table near the back, already set. He is already sitting. She recognizes him before she's told who he is, which will occur to her later as a thing worth noting. He doesn't announce himself with presence the way movies announce powerful men. He doesn't fill the room, doesn't command it. He sits the way a man sits when he knows precisely what he is and needs no external confirmation. Suit dark. No tie. He is reading something on a phone that he puts face down on the table when she approaches, and he looks up, and he waits for her to sit. She sits. For a moment neither speaks. The girls are safe, she'd been told this. Wren had said it in the car and said it again at the door. She'd been shown a photograph on Wren's phone. Aya and Zara sleep in a room with pale walls and a window, a familiar geography of childhood in a place Neriah had never seen. She believed it, because she chose to. "You interfered," Dario Vasca says. Not an accusation. An observation. The flat factual register of a man categorizing events. "Yes," she says. "Why?" She considers the question. Not performing consideration, she is genuinely turning it over, looking at it from the angle she's had all morning to examine. Why? As if there had been a calculation. As if there had been a moment in the pharmacy chair where she'd weighed variables and arrived at an answer. "They were scared," she says. "And there wasn't anyone else." He looks at her. The quality of his attention is something she hasn't encountered before, not predatory, not assessing her in the way men sometimes assess her in the diner, not the flat bureaucratic processing of the rider with no helmet. It is simply complete. He is simply looking at her, entirely, the way she has learned to look at rooms. "You could have been hurt," he says. "I know. You didn't know who they were." "No. You don't now, fully. I'm aware of that, too." Something shifts in his face. The very faintest thing, not a smile, not warmth, more like a door opening a centimeter and then holding. He says, "I would like to offer you something." And here is where she expects money. She is prepared for money. She has rehearsed a version of this conversation where she says that isn't necessary, and he insists, and she accepts because she is 23 years old, and her rent is 4 days past due, and she is human. She has given herself permission to accept the money. He doesn't offer money. He tells her about a role, not with the organization, not inside it in any way she would have to think about at night. An adjacent thing. A building his holding company owns on the west side, mixed commercial, 4 floors. The ground floor had been empty for 8 months. He is looking for someone to operate a food and drink concept there. The build-out would be handled. The licensing would be handled. The startup capital would be available. He says, "You have good instincts. You notice things. You don't panic." She stares at him. "This wasn't a reward," she says. He meets her eyes. "No," he says. She understood. It would take her until that evening, sitting on the edge of her bed in Unit 4B of the building on Calder Street, replaying the conversation in pieces, before she could name it exactly. It was recruitment. She says no before he finishes the sentence. Not "let me think about it," not "I'd need to understand more." No. The word arrives ahead of any deliberation, the way certain truths arrive, already formed, complete, requiring only delivery. Dario Vasca goes still. Not surprised, she doesn't think this is a man who is surprised by much. But still in a particular way. Recalibrating again. She is becoming familiar with this quality in him, the internal adjustment, the quiet reprocessing. You haven't heard the full terms, he says. I don't need to. Most people. I'm not most people. That lands. She watches it land. A thing he did not expect, not the words, but the delivery. Even indirect, no performance of bravado, just a statement of fact offered the same way she had offered everything else in his presence, plainly, without apology. He looks at her for a long moment. Why not? He asks. The question is genuine. No manipulation in it. She's learned, in 3 years of reading rooms, to detect the difference between a question used as a tool and a question someone actually needs answered. He actually needs to know. Neriah picks up her water glass and sets it back down. Because I can't own something I don't understand, she says. Because whatever that building would become, it wouldn't just be a restaurant. It would be connected to something. To this. She gestures at the table, the room, the fact of him. And I'd spend every morning looking at the walls and wondering what they were paying for. Silence. You're not wrong, he says. I know. He looks at his phone, face down on the table. He doesn't pick it up. Is there something you would accept? He asks. Nothing tonight. The directness seems to cost him nothing to witness. If anything, and she is not sure about this, not certain, but something in her peripheral reads it this way, it interests him. The way the girls had interested her, a pattern that doesn't match the expected shape. She picks up her bag. Your daughters are brave, she says. Aya especially. She made a decision about me in about 12 seconds. That's a good instinct. Wherever they're going, whatever school they're in, make sure someone teaches them to trust that instinct. She stands. He watches her. That's all you want to say to me? He asks. She thinks about it. Genuinely. Tell them I said goodbye, she says. They didn't get to. She leaves. On the bus home, she replays the conversation and waits for the doubt to arrive, the second-guessing, the what-if, the arithmetic of what she turned down placed against the reality of her bank balance, and the 4-day late rent and the diner, and the evening shifts and the 30-minute ride on the number 12 that waits for no one. The doubt doesn't come. What comes instead is a strange and specific clarity, the kind she hadn't felt since she was a child, deciding, at 13, in a group home common room, that she would never let what was happening to her become the thing that defined what she was capable of. The same animal certainty. The same body knowledge. She got off the bus at Calder Street. She climbed 3 floors. She sat on the edge of her bed in Unit 4B and she looked at the water stain on the ceiling above the window, and she thought, I made the right call. She thought, I hope that's actually true. She did not know, yet, that saying no hadn't removed her from the game. She didn't know that a man who had run an empire for 20 years by reading people, by the quality of their fear, the texture of their loyalty, the small tells that revealed whether something was authentic or performed, was sitting in a dark wood restaurant with white tablecloths, looking at the chair she had vacated, turning over something he didn't have a category for. She had refused. Without hesitation. Without negotiation. Without price. He didn't know what to do with that. And because he didn't know what to do with it, he did something he hadn't done in longer than he could remember. He thought about it. Three weeks later, her building gets a new landlord. She doesn't know this immediately. The change comes through paperwork, through a management company with a name she doesn't recognize, and it's Leon from the diner who points it out. You see this thing about your building? He shows her a city business filing on his phone, casually, the way he shows her things. She looks at it and looks away and doesn't think about it until the maintenance request she'd submitted 2 months ago, the leak under the kitchen sink, the one that had warped the cabinet floor, is fixed. Without her following up. Without a single email. Then the bus route changes. A new line, direct service from Calder Street to the restaurant district, stopping 2 blocks from the Meridian. She reads about it in the city transit update, and she reads it 3 times, and she doesn't say anything to anyone. Then, a month after the refusal, a woman calls the diner and asks for Neriah by name. She runs a culinary operations program at a nonprofit 2 neighborhoods over. They've received funding, she says. They're looking for candidates with hospitality experience who want to move into food business ownership. The program covers licensing, accounting, supplier relationships. It's fully funded for the cohort. How did you get this number? Neriah asks. A pause. We reach out broadly, the woman says. Neriah holds the phone for a long moment after the call ends. She knows. She doesn't know how she knows. She has no evidence, no paper trail, nothing she could point to and say this was arranged. But she knows the way she knew the watchers in the diner weren't there for the food. She knows the way Aya knew, in 12 seconds, who to trust. She sits with it. Is she being rewarded, she thinks, or positioned? There is a difference, and she cannot locate the line. A reward is given and done with. Positioning has an architecture. It builds towards something. It places a person in a configuration that will be useful later, in ways the person doesn't yet understand. She thinks about the building on the west side. The ground floor. Empty for 8 months. She thinks about the food and drink concept. The startup capital. She thinks about the fact that all of this, the maintenance, the bus route, the call, had arrived without a conversation. Without a request. Without her asking for anything, or agreeing to anything, or being placed under any obligation she could name. That was the precision of it that unsettled her most. She went to the program. She told herself she was going because she would have been a fool not to. She told herself the help was real regardless of its source, that the skills she would learn were hers to keep, that no one could retroactively reclaim a liquor license, or a business accounting course. She told herself Dario Vasca was getting nothing from this. She wasn't sure she believed it. She was in the 2nd week of the program when Aya walked into the diner. Not with her sister. Not with Rin or any other adult Neriah recognized. Alone, which should have been alarming, except that she moved through the door with the small deliberate calm of someone who had been somewhere before and knew exactly where she was going. She sat at the counter. She ordered orange juice. She waited until Neriah put it in front of her, and then she looked up, whole face, and she said, "My dad wants me to ask you something. But I wanted to ask it first." Neriah set down the glass. "Okay," she said. Aya wrapped both small hands around the glass. "Do you think," she said, choosing each word with the care of someone who had rehearsed this and was also departing from the script, "that bad people can do good things?" Neriah looked at her. At the stillness she had learned was not calm. At the enormous eyes reading the whole face. At the question that had clearly been turned over many times, in many rooms, by more than one person. The question that was, she understood, the real offer. Everything that followed would hinge on how she answered it. She doesn't answer right away. She pulls out the stool at the end of the counter, the one she uses when the diner's slow and her feet hurt, and she sits down so that she is level with Aya. This is something she learned early. If you want a child to believe you're being honest with them, you don't stand above them to deliver it. Aya watches her. The diner is quiet. Leon is restocking at the far end. The lunch rush hasn't begun. Outside, the street is bright and ordinary, nothing like the night she first saw this child. No rain, no bikes, no flood of white headlamps from a street that had turned into something else entirely. "I don't think the answer's the same for every person," Neriah says. Aya considers this. "But in general?" "In general." Neriah picks up a paper napkin and folds it once, a reflex. "I think some people who do bad things, the thing driving them isn't bad. They got cornered somewhere. Or they made a choice early that closed off other choices. And the bad things are how they've learned to survive inside that corner. She pauses. That doesn't make the bad things good. It doesn't clean them. But, says Aya. Because there's a but. She heard it coming. But it means the person isn't only the corner they're in. It means something else is still there. Aya is very still. My dad did a bad thing, she says. Matter of fact. The way children deliver the most enormous truths, without cushioning, because they haven't learned yet that truth is supposed to be padded. I imagine so, Neriah says. A lot of bad things. Probably. But he got us back. Aya looks at the glass. And he sent you the bus route. Neriah goes still. It takes her a moment to find her voice, and when she finds it, she keeps it very level. He told you about that? He tells us most things. A small pause. He said you would figure it out, and you would be angry, and he needed us to understand why you might be. Neriah breathes. Are you angry? Aya asks. She thinks about it properly. The bus route. The maintenance. The call about the program. The architecture of it all, the precise, unmistakable design. The fact that she had been moved around a board she couldn't see, and had felt it happening, and had gone anyway, and had learned things that were genuinely hers now, and was sitting here in her diner at noon on a Tuesday with this child's whole face attention on her, being asked the only question that mattered. No, she says. And it is true. Complicated but true. Aya nods slowly. He said you'd say that too. A trace of something, not quite a smile, the ancestor of one. He says you're the only person who said no to him and meant not yet instead of never. Neriah looks at her. At the girl she had stood in the rain for. At the girl who had eaten fries in a corner booth and said I'm Aya and trusted a stranger with a whole-face look at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. At the girl whose father had, in whatever language was available to a man who did not explain himself, and did not apologize with words, been trying, for 3 months, to say something. What does your dad want to ask me? Neriah says. Aya reaches into her jacket pocket and removes a small folded piece of paper. She places it on the counter between them. She takes a long drink of orange juice. He said to tell you that the ground floor on the west side is still empty. Neriah looks at the paper. She doesn't open it. She saved them that night, 2 girls in a rain-soaked diner, 2 girls with their backs to the room and 4 white knuckles and 1 question offered carefully across a counter. She saved them. But what she never fully figured out was this. Did she stop something dangerous from happening? Or did she become part of something bigger?